Today's video is all about the best places to live in Vancouver. This is the second in a two-part series where I dive deep into the hottest neighborhoods, the hottest communities throughout Metro Vancouver. And I've spent countless hours in the last couple weeks, not only pounding the pavement and exploring these neighborhoods and making sure I can show you exactly what these areas are like to live in, but I'm also gonna walk you through the map so you can see exactly where you're gonna wanna focus your search when you're thinking of moving in Vancouver. Let's get into it right now. My name is Sebastian Albrecht with the Living in Vancouver, BC team. Welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, this channel is all about living in and moving to Vancouver. I put up videos like this every single week. This week, it's the second in a two-part series all about the best areas in Vancouver to live. This is not my subjective opinion. I am basing this on objective data. Basically, where are we seeing the most growth in the last year? This is based on new Stats Canada data that was just released within the last month. And in this video, we're exploring the top 5 fastest growing communities in the last year. All right, so here we are with the map of Vancouver once again. And now we're gonna look at the top 5 best places to live in Metro Vancouver. And in 5th place is another one of my favorite communities. It's Port Moody. Port Moody is just to the east of Vancouver. And you can see it right here. Let's see. It's right in this little corner right there. And I'm gonna zoom in a little further. Let's bring up the boundaries of Port Moody. There we are. And here's the boundary of Port Moody. There we are. So Port Moody has 37,676 people currently. That's a growth in the last year of 4.24%. That's the first population increase over 4%. The numbers 10 through 6 were below 4%. Now we're above 4% annually in growth. And in the last 5 years, there have been 7.4%, 42%, I should say. So the majority of growth over the last 5 years for Port Moody has been in the last year. That's fairly significant. A typical house in Port Moody, you're looking at $2,140,100. That's a staggering increase of 7.2% just in the last year. A townhouse in Port Moody, you're looking at about $1,031,800. That's an increase of just 0.3%. So aside from townhouses in White Rock that we saw decline in the last video, this is the lowest increase of any property type throughout Metro Vancouver. So that's a little unusual for one of these really fast growing communities. And then there are condos, and in condos in Port Moody, they're typically going for about $744,100. That's an increase of 5.4%. So what do we have here in Port Moody, and what is driving this growth? Well, I would say if we move back a little bit, you can see the proximity of Port Moody to downtown Vancouver. And there is now a new SkyTrain line that basically runs up here and over here and over there. But you can see it is well serviced right in this region for Port Moody. So there is high density development that is happening along this corridor and in this neighborhood. And a lot of that development is turning, especially this zone. We've had a lot of single family residential being transformed into condo development. Now, it's not condo towers necessarily in this area. It's typically 4 to 6 story type buildings. Port Moody has become kind of an urban option. So I've talked about that in previous videos, where if you want an urban environment, you're typically sort of targeting this region. So downtown Vancouver, perhaps Mount Pleasant. And then the other area that people are drawn to when they're looking for a little more of an urban environment is New Westminster. But the third area that I haven't really talked too much about is that people are drawn to a little bit of the history, a little bit of that urban core that has been developing a little bit longer in Port Moody than most of the other suburbs. And Port Moody is another one of those older suburbs. In fact, it was viewed as the most likely destination for the Trans-Canada Railway. So initially, Port Moody was supposed to be the end of the Trans-Canada Railway until they decided to transfer it to Vancouver. So they sort of made a switcheroo right at the last minute. Turns out it wasn't a bad decision, because Port Moody, that end of the Burrard Inlet, turns out that it's been filling with sediment over the last 100, 150 years. And so it's become too shallow for the types of ships that are required for modern shipping, which Vancouver can handle because this is an excellent, safe port, and it's very deep. This water is not nearly as deep and has become kind of shallow. So turned out to be a good decision on their part. The result is Port Moody didn't develop in quite the same way that they thought it would. But the result today is that Port Moody really does have like a traditional downtown core. Higher density has been in this region a little bit longer than some of the other areas. But as we can tell by that 38,000 population, the population isn't high. Aside from condos being significantly in this region, you will find that there is also still single family residential, mostly sort of around here, to a certain degree up here as well. And this is the Heritage Mountain area, which is absolutely lovely. It's known for a little bit higher density, typically a little more townhouse development, but they've also developed some newer single family residential. So the single family residential up in this zone is considerably newer than down over here, or also compared to what is developed in this region. People love living here. They love the access to the outdoors. That is one of the big draws. So people that want a little bit of that urban environment, the convenience of being able to get downtown fairly quickly. There's quite a brewery scene along in this area right here. So lots of people come out from Vancouver on a nice warm sunny day, just take the SkyTrain and enjoy the patios in that region close to the park. Where are we? Right, Sasamat Lake. This here is White Pine Beach. Is a phenomenal beach in the summer months. I think I mentioned it in last week's video. That's a great destination if you're looking for an excellent place to go swimming with the family. Really warm water and a sandy beach. And Bunsen Lake, which is technically just outside of the Port Moody boundary, but this is also quite a popular summer destination and hiking. Some of my favorite hikes are actually up here in this area of Eagle Mountain. Incredible views this way and this way, really any way you look. So that's all very accessible, not just from Port Moody, but actually from everywhere. That whole Indian Arm area is absolutely gorgeous and kind of not completely untouched, but relatively untouched wilderness. This is an area that a lot of people are being drawn to. It's not, I would say families are drawn to the Port Moody area for the conveniences, for the access to the outdoors, and also especially up in this area, sort of affordability. The townhouses are sort of middle-aged, I would say. They're not too old, they're not brand new typically, but they're family-sized and they're relatively affordable for their proximity. They're really conveniently located to a lot of the amenities that are in this region. And then also now with the SkyTrain, which is located right around there, it makes commuting a lot easier. Now, in these higher density areas, here like Newport Village and Suterbrook, or along St. John here where all these new condos are being built, this is an area where a lot of young professionals are moving and families buying their first homes, where there is really excellent value, especially considering the proximity to the rest of the city, the rest of the population centers. So you should really be considering, along with so many other people, what's available here in Port Moody if you're thinking of moving to Metro Vancouver. One of the downsides I should point out though, just like when we were discussing North Vancouver, which is just over here in this region, is because of those North Shore Mountains, you are in this area where there is a considerable amount of rain. It is, in the winter months especially, relatively dark. So this is one of the areas where you have to be okay with that. You have to be comfortable with a little more wetness. You are in a rainforest. There is a lot of wilderness around. There's a lot of lush greenery, which is gorgeous and attractive. But if that really gets to you in the winter months, that would be a reason not to focus on Port Moody and sort of look at places that are a little further away from those mountains. All right, now in fourth place, we're looking at Mission. So up until this point, all of the communities we've been looking at are in Metro Vancouver. And Metro Vancouver, I'm just going to bring up so you can see, it doesn't actually cover all of the Vancouver region. Metro Vancouver is a political entity. So they manage these areas all together. So Mission is right here, and you can see right here is the border of what is Metro Vancouver. So this is the only one of these top 10 fastest growing areas of Vancouver that is outside of Metro Vancouver. It's actually in the Fraser Valley. And again, you can see here that border right there between Fraser Valley, which is all of this region, and Metro Vancouver, which is this region here. And much of the Fraser Valley is very much agricultural, and it's sort of land bound, you know, much of this area. But Mission right in here, it's essentially this zone right in there. So Mission is a little bit unusual for the Fraser Valley in that it is so much closer to Metro Vancouver. It borders onto Metro Vancouver, and it's not as land-bound. It's actually related much more to the local rivers and lakes than it is to the agricultural land. Although there is farming, and particularly tree farming in Mission. So let's zoom in on Mission here. Mission currently has a population of 45,556 people. That's an annual growth rate in the last year of 4.55%. So incredibly strong population growth. In the last 5 years, they've seen 6.35% growth. So again, the vast majority of that growth is just in the last year. This is what we're going to find as the most affordable, given that we're looking a little bit further to the east, further away from where land is most expensive at the downtown core of the city of Vancouver. So a typical house in Mission right now is $1,062,400. That's in May of 2024. And in the last year, that's been a price increase of 7%. Typical townhouse in Mission is $684,500. That's an increase of 6.5%. And a typical condo is $454,200. That's an increase of 4.5%. So a lot of growth, rapid growth just in the last year. And let me just show you where the geographic boundaries of Mission are. And there we go. So you can see it goes way up north here and way down here along the Fraser River, around Matsqui, surrounding Hatsick, and up here essentially. So you have these big lakes right there and right here. And then you also have the river right along its southern boundary. So Stave Lake and the Fraser River play an enormous role in the geography surrounding Mission. And so what is drawing people there, for one, is 100% the fact that there's relative affordability. Most of the people that are where most of the growth is and most of the population is right here in sort of the downtown areas of Mission. Definitely not up in these northern regions. There's not a lot going on up there. Obviously there's a little bit over here in Hatsick and a little bit over here in Silverdale, but this is really where the most growth is. And Mission is an older community. It's been around, I believe, founded in the late 1800s. There was most of the downtown core this is sort of like the low-lying area down here. And there was a massive flood in the 1890s where it destroyed most of what was developed, and they moved up a higher, putting their downtown a little bit higher away from that flooding. But that is also a little unusual for the Fraser Valley. So a lot of the Fraser Valley is actually pretty low-lying. That's why the land is perfect for agricultural, because it's so mineral rich. But most of Mission is actually elevated. So all of this region is elevated up here. So there's not a lot of highly dense alluvial soil up in those regions. You get a lot of views, which is something that people enjoy. You get a lot of opportunity to get out into the countryside, into the mountains, into the lakes. If you love fishing, if you love boating, this could be a paradise for you. So it is that affordability, it is that access to outdoors that is driving people there. But it's also still relatively, for the distance you're traveling, for the affordability, it's still in decent connection to the rest of Metro Vancouver, or to Metro Vancouver, I should say. And so Mission has that, it's the final terminus of the West Coast Express that heads out east and will go all the way to downtown Vancouver. And so people can take the West Coast Express, jump on that train and commute to work downtown, or commute to work in Coquitlam or Maple Ridge. That is a big driver of growth in recent years. This bridge is also a driver of growth. Before that bridge, it was pretty inconvenient. There, at a time, Mission was really a destination in the Fraser Valley. But when they developed Highway 1 over here, it drew all the growth that was happening in this region south, and it drew that population down here to Abbotsford. Where really over the last 40 years, most of the development, most of the growth has been happening. But in recent years, because of affordability, because of the connections to downtown, because of this bridge, an opportunity here, I would say. If you don't mind commuting, if you don't mind a lengthy commute, whether it's on train or in a car, or if you don't have to commute and you can work from home, Mission is an excellent opportunity for you where there's real affordability. I mean, this is essentially almost a third of the price that you're going to find in the city of Vancouver. A house in Mission is far more affordable, a condo in Mission, but you are going to find generally there's not a lot of high density, super high density. That's starting a little bit, but they're not building condo towers in Mission. At this point, there's still, you know, I think the biggest building that they've been building in recent years is maybe about 8 stories, just being constructed with some commercial development at the bottom. A lot of older stock in terms of townhouses, but a lot of that is turning over into newer townhouse development. And then again, a lot of older stock when it comes to houses, but some newer construction happening as this growth is booming in Mission. What I would say about the reasons why you may not want to consider moving out here, there are a lot of people that are concerned about the level of crime, the access to healthcare, as an example, sort of amenities in general. But if those things aren't really important, you enjoy being away from it all, and you enjoy that outdoor atmosphere, that access to the outdoors, but really you don't want to be in an urban environment, Mission should be an area that you should take a really serious look at. Now, I do want to recognize that just because these areas that I'm talking about are popular and there's a lot of growth, it doesn't mean that these are the right areas for you to move to. So as a realtor, I've helped hundreds of families move to Vancouver, and I can help advise you as well. If you're confused about where is the right spot for you and your family, be sure to reach out anytime. My contact information is right there on the screen. We can talk about the right move for you when you're ready. Let's get back to the video. So in third place in terms of the best places to live in Vancouver would be Burnaby. And Burnaby is the suburb that's immediately to the east of the city of Vancouver. So you have Vancouver right there, and then you have Burnaby right here. So they're neighbors. Let's zoom in a little bit. There we are with the city of Burnaby. So to the north, that's Burrard Inlet. To the south is New Westminster and the Fraser River. And then to its east is Port Moody and Coquitlam. So Burnaby has a population of 283,593 people as of right now. That puts it in third place in the region, behind Vancouver and behind Surrey. So it is one of the areas that you're going to see a higher population density. In terms of population growth, being in third place, it is one of the fastest growing communities in the Lower Mainland, with 4.63% growth in the last year. And in the last 5 years, also very consistent growth with 11.1% growth in the last 5 years. Again, most of that has happened in the last year, which is pretty astonishing. In terms of house prices, you look at a typical house in Burnaby, the price is $2,181,500, an increase of 8.7% in the last year. For a typical townhouse, it's $972,200, a 5.5% growth in the last year. And in terms of condos, 789,000. That's 2.4% growth in the last year. You can see that houses are considerably less expensive than they are in Vancouver, but condos, interestingly, aren't considerably less expensive. Like you're looking at about, what is that off the top of my head, maybe about 2-3% cheaper in terms of houses, but you're looking at almost a quarter less expensive in terms of detached homes. And what you're gonna find, whether you're looking at condos, townhouses, or houses in Burnaby, you are gonna just get more for your money than you're gonna get in the city of Vancouver. The houses tend to be on bigger lots. They also tend to be larger. The condos also tend to be bigger. There's a lot of new development that's been happening over the last few years. Primarily because I think people are getting pushed out of the city of Vancouver. They're not wanting to go too far afield. They still want to feel like they're relatively in the city of Vancouver, but they're not willing to pay for that price point, that proximity. So Burnaby is becoming a greater and greater alternative. So a little more value when it comes to money, the proximity, sort of the convenience of still being close into the city, and the newer options that are being developed there. So it's much more affordable to buy whether it's a new house or a new condo. Burnaby is an option that many people are looking at. And you get the benefit of that convenience, but also still getting a pretty urban environment. And you don't really have a traditional downtown core in Burnaby. What you do have, what they're doing is they're focusing growth basically on 4 different regions. And where you're seeing it is right here around Brentwood Mall, around Lougheed Mall, around Highgate, which is roughly, this is sort of the Edmonds area, and around Metrotown. So that is the way that the city of Burnaby is deciding. We don't just have one central location where we want to center the development. We're actually doing this in 4 different locations. So all these malls are getting redeveloped. I think Edmonds or Highgate isn't currently being redeveloped, but there's a lot of condo development that's happening in that area. But definitely Lougheed, Brentwood, and Metrotown are all in the midst, either just finishing or just starting massive amounts of redevelopment. And there are massive amounts of condos being built in these areas. Very high density, big, huge skyscrapers being built, the likes of which we're not really seeing in a lot of other areas other than the city of Vancouver, Coquitlam, and Surrey. Burnaby is one of the other municipalities that is very much feeling like they need to develop in order to accommodate the growth, the pressure, the population pressure, and providing housing for the people that already do and want to live there. Another big driver, you can see up in the corner of this is Simon Fraser University. A lot of people love Burnaby for its green space. You can see all the green in this, all of this park space, and right in the center of town as well. Central Park is over here, big golf courses. This is all green space that is open to the public and that the public has access to. And not only that, but on top of sort of being so close to the city, you have all these urban parks, but you also are kind of a hop, skip, and a jump away from everything that is up here. And so you do have fairly easy access this way, as well as this way, into the outdoors, if that's what you're wanting to do. Burnaby is one of those locations I think that people move to because it's convenient, it's affordable, and you can see also on this map how central it is. Like if you're living in this area of the city of Vancouver, it's an enormous pain to get all the way over here onto the highway and get out into the Fraser Valley and maybe go, golfing out in Langley or for a weekend to the Okanagan. If you live in this region, it's much easier just to get on the highway and get out into the Fraser Valley or get away for the weekend. And then also head out this way to, let's say, to Whistler, where I was just this past weekend. I had a phenomenal weekend, by the way. every once in a while, it's really important to get away, not just from your own surroundings, but also from the kids. So it was a rare occasion for my wife and I to be able to get out, enjoy a little bit of rest and relaxation away from the urban environment. So Burnaby is definitely one of the fastest growing, most popular areas. I'd say, what are some of the reasons that maybe Burnaby isn't exactly for you? I would say you need to be in a car much more than you do in some of the central areas of Vancouver. Having said that, it is one of the best connected suburbs to the SkyTrain. There's a couple different SkyTrain lines that run through Burnaby, and that is where all that high density growth is happening. All of the growth is happening around the major SkyTrain stations in Burnaby. So as much as cars are really a more likely requirement, you can still get away with living without a car in Burnaby, and more people are doing that. And it would be traffic, the annoyance of kind of having to deal with traffic mayhem. That's a little more common as you get into the suburbs than it is in the city. And certainly sort of this, the Trans-Canada Highway and Lougheed Highway and Hastings over here, all of these are major bottlenecks in rush hour traffic. Same with Kingsway, actually. Anything significant going through here. And this is a major thoroughfare. People coming from out here into here or over here, they're having to go through Burnaby, through New Westminster, or this way. Everything crosses through Burnaby, and that's one of the downsides, that dependence on vehicles, and then the amount of traffic that sort of occurs. But Burnaby is known for having good affordability, full outdoor access, great schools, good family environments. There's a lot going for it, and that's a lot of the reason that we're seeing so much growth in Burnaby in the last year. All right, so in second place, we have Langley. And Langley is far east. It's not quite as far as Mission. It's still within Metro Vancouver, but it is east of Vancouver, and it's east even of Surrey. It is roughly this approximate area right here. So it is Abbotsford now Aldergrove to the east. To the north, it's the Fraser River. To the south, it's the US border. And to the west, it's Cloverdale, Surrey. Langley, a little bit confusingly, has this area right in here, which is the city of Langley, and then all of the rest surrounding that downtown is the township of Langley. Don't ask me why they're separate, they just are. But in this case, what I'm doing is I'm combining those two areas just for simplicity. So Langley has a population of 187,733 people. This is one of the only places where we've seen over 5% growth in the last year, 5.15%. In the last 5 years, we've seen an astounding 15.7% increase in population. That's the fastest growth of all of the region in the last 5 years. And considering the amount of population that is in Langley, that is considerable growth. A typical house in Langley is $1,648,400, and not people. You don't have to pay in people. And that's an increase of 6.8% in the last year. It is, for a townhouse, $863,600, an increase of 6.5%. And for condos, this is actually interesting. One of the areas where we're seeing a faster growth in condo prices than in detached houses, but it is $625,100, an increase of 8% over the last year. So Langley is an area where you're going to see, because we're looking more, it's not in the Fraser Valley technically, it's still in Metro Vancouver, but we are seeing more rural, more agricultural. You can see all that green when we're looking at the map there, just for the simplicity, Langley Township. So you can see that how much of this is still just agricultural land, essentially, right? Massive amounts, and parks as well, but even up in close, right up against the city. And a lot of this is floodplain, and so you don't want to be developing it. And also agricultural land reserve, protected land, it's such fertile soil that we want to use it to sustain our population. But a lot of the growth here is happening in the north. Fort Langley right here. This was actually, I've spoken about sort of the history of the first settlements in the region. Fort Langley was the original settlement. It was the the first capital of British Columbia before BC and Vancouver Island combined into the current province that we now know. Before the provincial capital first moved to New Westminster, it was here in Fort Langley, and then subsequently moved out to Victoria. So Fort Langley has, there is still a fort there, which you can tour, and it's sort of this really fascinating. In fact, I have a photo I'll make sure we throw up here of me as a little kid with my parents at Fort Langley wearing a baseball cap. I don't know, I was into baseball back then. Fort Langley is really quaint, and a lot of people really love Fort Langley. One of the downsides of that Fort Langley area is flooding, the possibility of flooding, but there's a lot of growth nearby. So Walnut Grove, this area right here, is an incredibly popular family neighborhood. Willoughby is one of those areas that's seeing massive amounts of higher density development in recent years. So lots of townhouses, lots of not necessarily high-rise condominiums, but lower rise, newer stock is being built there. A lot of population density is moving in there. Langley City is also seeing a lot. So Langley City doesn't have a lot of sort of higher quality single family residential. There are some single family residential homes in that area, but it is known a little more for its crime. That is one of the downsides, I would say, especially of Langley City, that the crime rate is a bit on the high end for Canada, for Metro Vancouver. And you do see a lot of commercial, you do see a lot of sort of light industrial in Langley City, but that is shifting a little bit where they are building higher density. And in coming years, one of the reasons that we're seeing so much development happening is that we are starting to build the extension of the SkyTrain system, which will come from Surrey out to Langley in the coming years. And that's just construction that's underway. But if you're looking for where development is going to continue, where it's going to develop in the future, where demand, we can look at other regions of Metro Vancouver and see the development is all happening around the SkyTrain stations and easier, faster transportation into the downtown core. Even, you know, if we point to Mission, where they just had the West Coast Express, which has made a difference. But you can also see where we were just talking about in Burnaby, the high density that's happening around Brentwood and Lougheed as an example. The exact same thing is going to be happening in Langley. So if you want to buy for the future, you're not afraid of taking a little bit of a risk, you want a more affordable option, Langley might be an area that you may consider for establishing your family in Metro Vancouver. People love the fact that there's savings when it comes to owning homes or renting, that there's still very good access to the rest of Metro Vancouver. And if we back out here, what you're going to see is the highway, Trans-Canada Highway, runs right through, and there is development that is happening right around these areas, around the major off-ramps from this highway. And that's development that's going to continue happening. But most of the development, I think, in the future, and most of the opportunity would really be around those SkyTrain stations. But you still have access to a beautiful sort of less densely populated agricultural area. And a lot of people really love that option as well. So there are people who are moving out from somewhere much more highly densely populated like these regions, and maybe finding old farmland and being able to build a really big house on relatively inexpensive land. So much bigger pieces of land. Even, you know, in these regions, you're able to get bigger pieces of land than you'd be able to afford for similar price points, obviously, in these regions. And that's what is sort of motivating people to move out there. A feeling that, you know, family life might be a little more affordable, a little more possible, where up here you may only be able to afford a townhouse. Out here you might be able to afford an actual single family house. If you're willing to put up with a bit of a commute, as I've talked about in other videos, you know, as you get out further and as you have to cross more bridges, especially on the Trans-Canada, especially right here, this bridge crossing can be incredibly difficult, really challenging. And it can turn, you know, what might be an hour-long commute or a 45-minute commute into a 3-hour commute. Or if it snows, even worse. I mean, you could spend half your day basically stuck in traffic if there's a huge unexpected snowfall. So you want to be able to put up with that. You want to realize that there's a give and take here. But if you're willing to do that, and if you don't need to commute, if you're able to work from home, if you want sort of a more rural agricultural experience, being out in farmland, and the views are incredible. I mean, especially of the mountains up here, and when they're snow-capped, the farmland out, in this region is absolutely gorgeous. And then really fast, quick, easy access into the US. Cheap gasoline, cheap cheese. Go and check out the malls in the States, just going for a weekend into Seattle. That's a lot easier if you're living in this region than it is if you're living up here. So a lot of reasons why Langley is seeing enormous amounts of growth. Very popular. You do have to put up with traffic. You do have to have a willingness to commute. To a certain degree, you're also going to have not necessarily considerable amounts of rain, because you are a little further from, the mountains, and the most rain are really up in this region. So it is a bit drier out here, but it's what you're going to find. There's also a little more sunlight than you're definitely going to find up here. But what you're getting is colder winters. So you are going to find there's more snow, a little more extreme, because you're a little bit further from the moderation of the ocean over here and the warm air that's coming off the ocean in this direction. So temperatures are a little more extreme. They get hotter in the summer, and they definitely get colder in the winter months. And in the winter months, as a result of having colder temperatures, you get more snow in an area like Langley, something you're going to want to be prepared for. All right, in first place, we have Surrey. And very consistently over a long period of time, really as long as I can remember, Surrey seems like it's been at the top of the list of the fastest growing communities around Vancouver. At the moment, Surrey is in second place in terms of total population for the region. It has 653,039 people. That's an increase of 5.5% in the last year. Over the last 5 years, it has 12.9% population growth. So one of the fastest growing communities over a long period of time. In fact, it's so fast growing that very soon it's going to overtake, they say, the city of Vancouver. So as we can see, in the last year, Vancouver has had a population growth of 3.76%. Surrey, 5.5%. Very consistently, Surrey is surpassing the growth that we're seeing in Vancouver. And as a result, it won't be that long. I think they're saying in 2030 at the latest, Surrey will actually pass Vancouver in terms of total population. And the reason for that isn't that people don't want to be in Vancouver. It's really a matter of affordability, and it's a matter of space. Vancouver is a much smaller city. It's just 115 square kilometers. As a result, the land is much more valuable, and we're just not able to build to the same extent or redevelop to the same extent that Surrey can. Surrey is a massive city. It's the largest geographic area of all the cities in Metro Vancouver, and they're very pro-development, and they are pushing hard for a lot of growth. And that growth is happening primarily around SkyTrain stations. Surrey Central City and Surrey Newton, the two major SkyTrain destinations, they're seeing massive amounts of new development, big condo high-rises being built. All sorts of city amenities and city services are being built around those destinations. So they're planning for massive amounts of growth. But what it's like to live in Surrey really depends on where you're looking. So there's a lot of variation. I'm going to touch on the housing in Surrey, just so you have an idea. Typical house in Surrey is $1,555,600 at an increase of 4.1% in the last year. A typical townhouse is $863,200, an increase of 3.1%, and a typical condo is $578,700, an increase of 5.6%. So you can see population growth is the fastest of any of these communities, but we're actually seeing still considerable increase in values, but not nearly as fast as many of the other fast-growing neighborhoods and cities in Metro Vancouver. And that, again, is mainly because of the size. There's always more townhouses that can be built, always more condos, and there's still room for more houses. So land is not as much of a premium in Surrey as it is elsewhere. One of the things you are going to find in Surrey is your money is going to go a lot further. You're going to be able to buy something that's a lot more luxurious because the cost of the land isn't as significant a portion of the purchase price as it is elsewhere. And if you are purchasing there, you're much more likely to get not only sort of more modern finishing, something newer, but also something a lot larger. as an example, if you're looking in the city of Vancouver, you're looking at relatively small pieces of land, relatively small houses, something in the 2,000 square foot range, including basement, where in Surrey, a house might be 4,000 square feet, 5,000 square feet, and cheaper than what you're going to find in the city of Vancouver. So again, similar to Langley, there are people who are being motivated by affordability moving to Surrey, and it's becoming increasingly an attractive option, especially for young families that feel like they need more space and want a little piece of their own land. They want a backyard, they want a garage. Things that you might not be able to afford if you're staying in the city of Vancouver, you're much more likely to afford in Surrey than just about anywhere else. And if we're looking at sort of the prices, the only prices I can pick up looking here quickly that are less expensive would be Delta. We can see Surrey is right here. So Delta over in this region, or Mission, which is way over here. So those are the only areas that are, you can count on as being more affordable than Surrey. So it's a good trade-off for a lot of people where they're still fairly close in. The commute is relatively easy, especially if you're close to a SkyTrain. I mean, Surrey, one of the big detractions is definitely traffic. Because it's so big, because it has these highways running through it, and there's so many people spread out over such a great distance, traffic can honestly be probably worse here than just about anywhere else. And I feel like whenever people are complaining about how bad traffic is in Metro Vancouver, I feel they usually either live in Surrey or they have to travel to or from Surrey. If you have to have that experience, this is the feeling, this is the worst of Metro Vancouver. But there is a SkyTrain, and I'm just gonna zoom in a little bit. Let's look a little closer. That is the outline of Surrey. So you see on the north, it's bordered by the Fraser River. To the west, it's Delta, the ocean. There's White Rock, just a little bit of White Rock right there, and the US border. And then to the east, it's Langley. And similar to Langley, there's still some agricultural land in this kind of region. But there's a lot of high density being built up Surrey Guildford, Town Center, Newton. Lots of high density being built, lots of opportunity for whether it's investment or buying a first home. So young professionals are finding this is a place that they're being drawn to. There's much more of sort of an urban center being developed than there once was. And families are really finding affordability here as well, whether it's in North Surrey, buying a single family residence sort of in this area. The pricier, more luxurious communities are considered to be in this South Surrey region. More so on this side of the highway. So this highway right here is the way that people coming out of whether it's Richmond, Delta, or Vancouver are heading to the United States down this highway. But this area is really sort of one of the areas that a lot of people view as being one of the nicest family neighborhoods, big houses, good schools, good family amenities like good sports programs, good community centers, libraries, all of that. And then on this side, there is some high density being built, condo buildings, but also a lot of townhouse development. And so I'm finding a lot of the families are being driven out into this direction. One of the downsides though, as we can see, is that commute. And I talked about it when I was talking about White Rock, but you can imagine if you're in the South Surrey / White Rock area, this is about as far away as you can get from downtown Vancouver, if that's where you happen to work. And you're not just needing to go north. No, you need to go north, and then you need to go all that way west. And north is brutal. It's challenging to get through Surrey in the middle of rush hour. But it's also incredibly challenging to make this commute. So those two commutes combined, really no matter what direction you need to go. And the nice thing would be that you do have a few different options, right? Potentially even this way. So you have 3 or 4 different options in how you get there, but they all become bottlenecks because you're either crossing a tunnel, a bridge, a bridge, a bridge, another bridge over here, another bridge over here. Those are all severe bottlenecks that make commuting really challenging. And there's no immediate likelihood that high-speed transit is coming into this region. So in terms of rapid transit, there is rapid transit that basically just comes to about there. And there's, I believe it's 4 stations kind of in these areas where density is being centered. And there will be the Langley extension, as I mentioned in the last segment about Langley, heading out this way. So there will be, I think it's 4 or 5 stops that are being built along this section. You know, if you live down here, you're reliant on a bus. If you live down here, if you're reliant on a bus, that's quite a long distance to get all the way up here to get onto the SkyTrain, and then that SkyTrain's taking you into downtown Vancouver. And so commuting any other way other than via vehicle is really challenging. You do want to consider that in terms of the trade-off to live in these communities. Many people are making that choice. Many people are happy, and they're moving from, you know, I would say people that aren't really batting an eye at that would be people who tend to move from higher density areas, whether it's somewhere like New York or LA or Toronto, where this isn't really a big deal. If you have to commute an hour and a half each way, you know, you're not really bothered by it. But if you're moving from somewhere like Victoria or from Regina, Saskatchewan, this kind of commuting is going to feel like a burden. It's going to feel incredibly immense. And this trade-off might not be worth it to you. But the other thing to consider is what the weather is like. That is another reason that people are really enjoying moving to the South Surrey area in particular. There is a pretty big difference between weather up here and weather down here. Down here, this is one of those areas, along with Tsawwassen in Delta, that sees the least amount of rain in all of Metro Vancouver and the warmest temperatures, especially these areas sort of really proximate to the ocean, where the water is moderating the temperature. You know, the more you move inland, like over here, you are going to get similar temperatures to what you get in Langley, where the temperatures are a little more extreme, higher highs in the summer months and lower lows in the winter months. And certainly Surrey ends up in these areas, sees much more snow than you're going to find in this area, and even that you really find sort of in this area. This area does get a decent amount of rain, but this South Surrey area is definitely similar to Delta, the Tsawwassen Boundary Bay area of Delta, where it's some of the lowest precipitation you're going to find and more sunlight. And so often, you know, when I was saying this as I was filming B-roll up here in Port Moody, because of the North Shore Mountains, this area, it was all, you know, rain, where I could see on the horizon, this area was super bright and sunny. And sure enough, after I did the B-roll over here, I drove out to Tsawwassen, and sure enough, it was super sunny. It had felt like almost a fall day over here in Port Moody, and this was late May, so the very end of May in 2024. And down here, it was practically beach weather. That's a trade-off, you know, you might want to make. You might be willing to take on a little more of a commute. And the people who are drawn to Surrey definitely typically are more willing to take on that commute, or they're working remotely, or they're really driven to a little more space, or maybe, you know, your commute isn't into downtown Vancouver. Perhaps you can live in Central City here and you work over here, or maybe you work in North Delta, or you're just heading over here to Coquitlam. So those commutes aren't nearly as bad and much more reasonable, and only you can decide that for yourself. But these are all things that you're going to want to take into account. Surrey is an amazing place to live. It's seeing a massive amount of development and growth, but there are some detractors, there are some downsides, things that you're going to want to take into account. And of course, I can help you work through that as well. Well, that was fun. It was an exciting tour throughout Metro Vancouver. I hope you got value out of it and you enjoyed it. I really did love sharing all of that information with you. But I can understand all of that is pretty overwhelming, especially if you're thinking of moving here from somewhere else. I mean, where is the right fit? What makes the most sense for you and your family? If that's a question you don't fully know the answer to, if you'd like to discuss that with me, you're thinking of purchasing here in Vancouver, my contact information is right there on the screen. Be sure to reach out anytime. I've helped hundreds of families just like yours over my 18-year career. I can help you as well. Feel free to reach out anytime. But if you're not quite ready to do that, that's totally okay. Feel free to check out all of my video catalog. I'm putting out videos just like this one about moving to and living in Vancouver every single week. And I'm gonna keep doing it as long as I can because I know it's offering so much value. I keep hearing from people just like you about how much you love these videos and how much value you're getting out of them. So I'm really enjoying producing these videos. I'm glad you're enjoying watching them. If you are, be sure to hit that like button, smash the subscribe button not to miss a single video. And if there are some that I could recommend to you, I'd love to meet you over on these two videos. This one over here is all about a budget, what the cost of living is in Metro Vancouver. And then this is the last video I did, part one of this series, all about the best of Vancouver, places to live in Metro Vancouver. Check out both those videos and I'll see you on next week's.